Hi ladies, it's Jen. So we are going to talk about how you square this block. So this block should come out at about 8.5 by 8.5. Now if you have an 8.5 by 8.5 inch ruler, great. If not, you can use a larger ruler. What I like to do, so each block here is going to need to be 4.25. Okay, so 4.25 on this side, 4.25 on this side would give you 8.5. So what I do is I find my 4.25, 1, 2, 3, 4.25, and I line that quarter up on the line that you can see, and then I just kind of square it. I take my ruler and square it up. Now, if you have a little bit less, that's okay, as long as it's within 1/8 of an inch. We can work with it. So, and you could even line it up so that you're on 4.25 and 4.25, so that you can square two sides. Okay, and really you should just be taking some little fuzzies off. There really shouldn't be a whole lot. And oftentimes when you're squaring your blocks, you tend to have, there, it takes a minute too. But you want to make sure that you're square here in the center, because if you're not, what happens is you square it like diagonal. So find a line on the block and line it up with your ruler, okay? And that helps you square your block. But like I said, oftentimes you have a block that's a little too small. But as long as it's within that 1/8 of an inch, like some of these I think come out a little too small, but that's okay. I'll just work with it. So like right here is a little bit shy of this corner here, but as long as it's within 1/8 of an inch, I can make it work. So what I'm going to do for my rows is I'm going to line these up so that these diagonals touch, okay? And I'm going to start in the corner, and I'm going to lay my blocks out, and just from there I'm just going to keep going in rows, and then I'm going to sew. What I like to do is I sew 2 together at a time, just down the center. Now this is where you can seam here if you want, if you have pressed your blocks a certain way. If not, you just stack them, and because sometimes it's hard. You can't go back. I wouldn't be able to go back and repress these because this was the edge. So, but that's okay. All you do is you stack them, and you just make sure that this line here is lining up. And so I'm just going to sew down here, and I'm going to just do 2 by 2, and make sure you follow your pattern so that you've laid out your block. So I would lay a row out and follow your pattern, lay the row out and sew 2 together. So the next 2 together, and then the next 2, if it's an even number in your row, if it's an odd number, I sew 2 and 2, and then I sew that 1 to a 2 pack, and then I sew the 3 to the 2. And then I press it all and make sure that it's all going to lay flat before I sew the next row together. All right, so I will come back and show you a row finished. Hi everyone, so I have here are some rows that I've put together in various steps. So I like to sew 2 together. Now when I laid the fabric on top, what I noticed is that this 4 patch is here and this 4 patch is here. So I like to line up. Sometimes you can sandwich these seams, sometimes not. You just need to stack them. But then you want to sandwich or stack this seam. So what I like to do is I like to pin here, and then I also like to make sure that this is lining up and then I don't have my block kind of twisted. And so this one I leave alone. I usually start here, but this one I track down here that I kind of have it pinned. So then I press it open. I do the same for these two pieces, and then I add the third to one of the sets. And so all I need to do now is to sew these together. Now, I like to make sure that this is kind of lines up, that this lines up, that this here sandwiches. And so for this one, I'm going to pin just right here where these two pieces sandwich together. But I also want to make sure that this piece right here is stacked. Or sandwich. Sometimes it doesn't sandwich. You've pressed them and they're both pressed the same way and they're sewn again, and so they're kind of in their position. But then I make sure that this is in the right spot as well, because then I know it's square. That'll matter once I press it open and I'm trying to go to the next row, okay? So I'm going to sew this one together. That's my last row that I need to put together. Now, in this pattern, we have this row, the one that looks like this, and we have this row, and they just repeat. So you're going to need 4 that look like this, with the dark, light, dark, okay? And then, so 4 like that, and 3 like this, okay? And then what I like to do is I like to do 2 at a time, and so I would fold this over like this. And actually, and so when I was pressing, I pressed the seams of one of these rows all one this way, and then I pressed the next row all the way that way, so that I can at least sandwich these pieces where the blocks come together, just like that. And so I pin along. Now, as I'm sewing, I like to make sure that these other places are matching up, because it will matter later that these seams kind of line up with each other. So keep that in mind. And I don't always pin every spot, but I do, as I'm going, make sure that I'm lined up correctly, that I've sandwiched them as I sew. And like this one, it's going to line up right there. Yeah. I'm going to pin it. Put one more seam in here, and then even when I'm sewing this last row, I'm going to make sure that these kind of line up as I sew it, and also that down here lines up as well, so that when I press it open and I go to do the next row, I don't have like a twisted, it's not a twisted row, okay? So I'm going to sew those two things together. Now I already have a couple rows that I did here. So here's 2 rows that I have sewn together and pressed. Now I like to, this is going to be 2 pieces, this is going to be 2 rows sewn together, and then I'm going to add that 3rd row. What I like to do is keep my pieces, like this is now a larger piece, I like to keep them as symmetrical as possible. What that does is, instead of taking this and just adding a row, the bigger piece gets longer and longer and heavier and heavier. So as you're sewing, the under piece kind of drifts underneath and you may not catch it. You don't realize you have it pinned, but it's still kind of, it's so heavy and it comes off the side of your machine that it pulls. So I like to keep the pieces that I'm laying on top of each other as much the same size as possible. So for this, I'm going to, this is my first row, and I'm going to attach it to this second row. Now, once I'm done with these 2, I will have 4 rows sewn together. Then I would take these 3 rows and sew those 3 together, and that's as close as I'm going to get to them being as symmetrical as possible, because it's an odd number. But I find that it works best if you keep, as you attach rows, that you keep them as close to the same size, so that you're not working with one big piece of fabric and then just one row. The fabric just kind of sticks to each other if it's like this, and sometimes you have to finagle the fabric a little bit. It's okay to, it's better to stretch it just a hair if you're just slightly off than to have your lines be a little wonky. Because once you sew everything, and once you wash it, certain things will, but you'll see that your line might be. And so then I go over here and make sure that I'm kind of staying, and then I'm keeping it straight. So I just kind of pin over here just for good measure. So I will sew down this side, sew this row, this last row. I'll probably start with this, finish this row, then I'm going to sew this one to this 2 patch, sew this 4 together, and then sew the 3 to the 4. So really I'm almost done, and then I will have most of the top done, and then we will move on to borders. I hope this helps, guys. All right, everyone. So here is the final piece of the inside. Next is borders. Isn't that great? So it comes together really quickly once you start sewing those rows together. It's super cute. You can see how you can see this, and it crisscrosses right through here. Super cute. I really like it. So this is going to be my summer picnic blanket. But I will see you back here for the next video when we do borders.